In the big beautiful bill of there's 10 years of AI can do whatever it wants, it can expand however much it wants, and there's no regulation on it. What does that really mean?
That is probably the most important question that we need to collectively answer, not just from an environmental standpoint, but just overall impact, right? Environmentally, societally, economically.
Right.
And so the big beautiful bill is one kind of indication that Pandora's box is definitely open, right? And I think that's the analogy most people use. It gives a lot of people fear, rightfully, because we don't know where this is headed and the brakes are kind of more or less off.
From the Sarah Smiles Network, I'm Sarah Smiles, and this is the Consider the Source podcast, a show about women who've built ideas, movements, and careers by questioning the status quo and challenging the norms in hopes of inspiring other women. On today's episode, I'm joined with Vanessa, or more commonly known to the internet as Think with V, who is an AI guru and knows a great deal about both the philosophical side of AI as well as the technical side of AI. In today's episode, we'll talk about a lot of the grievances that she gets as a creator in the realm of AI, as well as her own personal struggles that she faces with AI. In this episode, we also talk about AI's contribution to climate change, what AI really does to critical thinking, what AI really means for the future of careers and work, how marginalized communities can actually stand to benefit from AI. So without further ado, here's V.
So I got into AI basically from the most random way, which is, people don't people don't know that there actually is a big subset, I think, of people who are really into AI, who are also kind of into the woo-woo kind of things. And we have found each other. But one of the things that I attribute to starting this AI journey is I'm an Aquarius sun. For all the woo-woo people, they know what that means. And I have it in different parts of my birth chart that when I found out about it, I was like, that makes sense. I'm very much into emergent tech. I always have been. However, I've never been a technical person. My career, even my interests, lay firmly on the non-technical side of things. I don't code. I'm not a developer. However, when it comes to trends, gaming, hardware, how people are using it, particularly in their lives and their culture, I've always been what's called an early adopter. I like to get my hands on it. I like to see if it's useful or if it's not. And if it is, I tend to tell everyone and anybody, right, about it. And usually most people are like, you're nuts, you're crazy, why does this even matter? But AI is one of these topics where people cannot say that because it has become so pervasive. And so like a lot of other people, I first encountered AI when ChatGPT 3 first came out in November of 2022. And it was more out of curiosity rather than any sort of work objective, right? And I think that was the case for a vast majority of people. And at the time, it seemed like a very cool kind of feature, oh, this is so much better than Siri, right? That was our baseline. And gradually, actually, let me strike that, not gradually, very, very quickly, it became very clear that this was different, transformative. Even in that early stage. And then they released 3.5 in 2023, and then now we have 4 and all of these other models. And in the past 2 years, I have learned to use it in my personal life in a variety of ways, whilst the world has also grasped its importance in professional life, right?
Yeah.
We can't really scroll a feed without, some tech bro talking about this insane automation, right? That is going to save you so much time or whatever. But I really embarked on AI from a personal standpoint in terms of how it has helped me think, manage all of the thoughts in my head, and also actually show up better because of what I call cognitive capacity, right? And that's been the most transformative part. And as kind of a great side effect of that is I've also now started using it for work as well as for side projects. And so leading, AI projects at, work there, and then also helping people with their own AI journeys on the side. Yeah.
That's an amazing journey because I feel like early adopters with AI are normally middle school, high school students that are trying to get out of doing their homework. And I remember my first exposure to ChatGPT, and it was through a work forum, and I was going to a venture capital summit, and I was like, no one's gonna know what AI is when I go there. And everybody there was talking about AI, and if the companies that they were going to invest in had an AI model built out and what it was gonna and how they were gonna incorporate it. And I was like, okay, so suddenly everyone is talking about it when seemingly I just figured out what it is. And you're so right. Like, there was no gradual increase to people using it. It was out and people are using it. And what interests me is watching how really good people use it. And when I say good people, I mean people like you who have figured out what are the prompts that I need to put in order to get a good result. Because it's not like you can put junk in and get good stuff in return. You get good stuff when you put good information in. So, for instance, what is something in your personal life that you're like, I'm going to automate this particular thing and allow it to be this much easier? Like, what is an example of a prompt that you have used or that you've recommended for people to use in just everyday life?
That's a really good question. And you illustrate, I think, what a lot of people experience in terms of having never heard of it, maybe kind of considering it, and then suddenly it's like, how is everyone already talking about this, right? And I think for a lot of people, because look, the reality is that this is literally like barely 3 years old, right? And so the acceleration of everyone kind of getting into it literally has been like trial and error, right? You are the N of one. You are the self-experimenter kind of jumping in and trying it. But there's a critical mass of enough people doing it, especially in the workspace, that they're like, we got to jump on this thing and do it. However, to your point, the real traction with AI comes from like your own journey with it. And you don't always need a course. And in fact, it is just kind of having this experimentation with any AI. It could be Gemini, it could be ChatGPT, it could be Claude. And so what I like to tell people when they ask me that question is, what are the prompts that I need? What I want to bring it back to is like, well, what exactly is that prompt? Why do you need to prompt this AI in order to like get what you need? Because it's a very critical piece, but I also want to like completely diffuse it, because I think a lot of people hear prompt, or especially like prompt engineering, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, what is that? Like, I'm not technical, like, I don't know that. So let's be clear, like a prompt is asking a very clear set of instructions, directions, and or question, right? Saying, can you do this? And a good prompt, what it does is take something that is AI. We call it artificial intelligence, but let's be real, it's actually better called collective intelligence. It is generalized knowledge. It is very smart, like software computers that is heavily trained on basically every bit of knowledge that currently exists in the world. It is collective intelligence. It's general. So what are you doing with the prompt? Your prompt is like, for like you fantasy and Harry Potter fans, your prompt is your spell that you give to this artificial intelligence to then specialize and hone in and give you back exactly what it is that you need. And so a prompt that helped me significantly isn't like just one prompt, but it is actually like a structure or components of a prompt. Now, if you're using it for business, I will say, hell yes, like use a framework, like you have to be more like, structured about it. But if you're using it casually, conversationally to get to know the AI, the structure can be very loose. And what you need to do is give it a task. Like, what is it that you actually want it to do? The more specific you are with AI, the better it is. You need to give it kind of like a role or like an area of expertise, right? You don't need to say like, oh, you're a world-class marketer. You can just say like, you know a lot about social media marketing, or you know a lot about X. And then give it lots of context. Context is basically like, the nerds like me call it tacit knowledge. All of the different variables that affect like what's happening right now. What are the details? Like, what are the facts? What's on your mind? What are the other considerations? And that's what goes into a prompt. People hear that and they go, whoa, that's like a lot to type. But that's the beauty of like personal AI and conversational AI, is that you don't have to do it all in one go. You start with a conversation starter. The AI gives you an answer and you go back and forth. And so, very long way of answering a question. The best prompt that I've had has been great conversation starters. And what an area in life that it has helped me kind of minimize drastically is decision making. So for all the woo-woo people, I have a Virgo stellium, which means like my mind is ruminating. I am always going. I'm also type 1, and I also am the eldest daughter, and I am always planning everything. But I'm also a high performer. But prior to me working with this AI, it's been I ruminate and I come to a decision and everyone's like, "Great, you did good work," or like, "You make great decisions," but I am spent. Right.
Yeah.
But with a good prompt saying like, hey, I have this problem in this area of my life. This is the context and I need to do this. I now have a thought partner that helps me consider and prioritize and even like wait out what my options are. And it helps me make a decision in half the time and literally like 1/4, right, of the load. I'm still thinking, but I didn't have to aggravate myself.
Yeah. And once you teach AI information about yourself, like that whole list of what you identify as is like, I'm the oldest daughter, I'm a high performer, I'm an Aquarius sun, like all of those things, it then takes all of that information into consideration when generating responses. And so I have used AI in a very similar capacity of, here are the two options that I'm weighing. I want to try and have X outcome. Which one is going to give me a better result based on these three indicators that I'm looking to follow? And from there, then I read the AI overview of, okay, here's what is generated. Here is what we think, or here's what is thought based on what your input is. And from there, then you kind of have the ability to be like, okay, that's a good idea, or that's horrible, give me something else. And I think the importance lies in recognizing, because I hate when people say, and I'm sure that you've heard this so many times, that AI is the antithesis of in-depth thought, or it is the antithesis of any sort of critical thinking. And I just have found that not to be true.
I have a theory. We'll call it a hot take because the theory sounds too academic. So my hot take is that a lot of people who say that AI ruins critical thinking are not neurospicy. Right. They are people who have never had to deal with rumination or with racing thoughts or with having 20 spinning plates of legitimately good and dense like threads and ideas, that they would never be presented with a situation of like, why would I want to delegate any of this, or why should we delegate any of this? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. And many of the people who tend to be in that camp of like, actually AI has been incredibly beneficial for my cognitive capacity and my cognitive leverage for higher order like thinking, have been people who call themselves like neurodivergent or neurospicy, and also women who tend to have much higher cognitive loads of things. Because look, we talk about AI primarily in a workplace setting, and 50% plus of the workforce are women. However, when they go home, most women, it doesn't matter the size of the household or who they are, most women, and I'm talking like, I know in heteronormative kind of gendered terms here, but bear with me in that they are also, we'll say, the primary kin keepers of their communities, their households. They don't need to have children, but they could be like the people like in their community who plan, who make things happen, who make things go. And that's extra load. And so when I think of people who are neurodivergent and also women, and maybe both, they're the ones that I come across who say, AI has unlocked something for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like on that same vein, I have used AI in a variety of different capacities. I now, moreover, use it as an assistant tool to running my podcast and helping bounce ideas and help run social media, because when you have a business and you don't have the ability to afford business partners or the ability to afford outside services like social media management or outside services like marketing and things like that, you have to rely on your own brain. And if you can hire, quote unquote, an expert to do that, you're saving yourself so much time and money. So my confusion lies in how is that not critical thinking? Because one of my go-to motifs in life is you can't be everything to everybody. And so if you pick the one thing that you want to focus on and get really good at that, and outsource everything else. Why do you need to spend the energy and get choice fatigue on every single thing that you're doing, when the one thing that you want to focus on doing and the one thing that you're really good at doing is then fatigued by every other choice that you have to make because you have to run a solo business. For me, for instance.
You bring up such a good point in that there are three nuggets in there that call out to me as you talk. One is that AI as a technology in general makes it possible for small scale like businesses and brands to actually level up and be competitive to larger enterprises that have the resources, right? That have the teams of people. And so that's a game changer. Like there suddenly is this compression between like players in the industry. The other part of it too is this idea of specialization and like giving yourself the capacity to actually root down and like do the thing that gives you joy, that gives you flow, that you're really good at, that is hard, that has historically been hard for entrepreneurs. Because of the third thing, which I think is the biggest narrative that AI really contradicts, is this idea of like hustle. And girl, I know you know me, like I've seen your content. We know how to hustle. No one needs to tell us to hustle. We hustle by default because of what we take on and what we're passionate about. But what I think we have tended to do in this culture is to glorify that hustle and this idea of burnout. And like the more you struggle with something, the more valuable it is, or that the more worthy it is. And, you know, to paraphrase a couple of wise people I know, is like, why does it always have to be so hard? It doesn't need to be hard. And just because it's not hard doesn't mean that it's not necessarily of value. And we're not saying that like it's frictionless, right? That you put no thought into it, because you obviously do. But yeah, it is this idea of like, well, AI makes it, you know, it's almost, they're equating the use of AI with like a lack of hustle and intention. But I would like to uncouple this idea of like our output and this idea of like eternal hustle of it actually being like worthy.
Yeah.
You know?
And to continue on that same note, I remember I was in middle school and my dad also really loves new technology, loves getting all the new gadgets and whatnot. And he had just bought the new iRobot like lawnmower, and it would go out and do the whole lawn, and it looked terrible, but the lawn was mowed. And so we didn't have to worry about mowing it, which was great because my dad was a single father and he was raising 3 kids and we all did our own activities and whatever. And it was just one less thing for us to have to do. And I remember like we lived in a big neighborhood, and so everyone would pass by our house and be like, you guys are so lazy that you can't even mow your own lawn. And it's like, no, we actually have so much going on that we automate this process so that we don't have to spend time doing something so mundane.
Right. It's this weird like double standard, because like we glorify, you know, the people who have quote unquote made it. Right. It's this weird like double standard, because like we glorify, you know, the people who have quote unquote made it, right? That they can delegate and like have help, right? But at the same time, if you are actually like using it, then you're kind of called out, right, for being quote unquote lazy, rather than, I think now the new narrative that we're starting to see emerge is the biggest luxury is time, right? The biggest asset, time. Like dollars matter, sure, but like how you choose to spend your time and how you delegate what is worth it to you and what it isn't is honestly the biggest flex. And AI is the first, I think, technology that allows just about anybody, right, to do that. Like if you think about it's only $20 a month. I mean, people are like, I don't want to pay for a subscription. Totally fair. But if you consider, to your point, for $20 a month for a paid Chat GPT or a Claude or a Gemini subscription, suddenly you have the power of a whole team, right? And just being able to do more with yourself with that $20 investment for $240 a year. Suddenly you have like not even 10x yourself. You have like 20 right, your own output and capacity.
Yeah, 100%. And the other part of AI that I feel like gets more political or polarized is in the realm of one Google search is equivalent, or one ChatGPT search is equivalent to 3 Google searches, I think is what my research from ChatGPT said. So that to me, of being somebody that's really passionate about climate change and preserving the environment that we live in, and seeing what's in the big beautiful bill of there's 10 years of AI can do whatever it wants, it can expand however much it wants, and there's no regulation on it. What does that really mean?
That is probably the most important question that we need to collectively answer, not just from an environmental standpoint, but just overall impact, right? Environmentally, societally, economically.
Right.
And so the big beautiful bill is one kind of indication that Pandora's box is definitely open, right? And I think that's the analogy most people use. Gives a lot of people fear, rightfully, because we don't know where this is headed and the brakes are kind of more or less off, right? But what I would like to remind people of that Pandora's box analogy is, do you know what was the last thing left in Pandora's box after all of the evils like went out into the world?
Something good, I imagine.
Yeah, it was actually something good. The last thing left in Pandora's box was hope.
Okay. So that's good.
So, yeah, so it's really good. So it's this idea of the fears are going to be there. They should be there. But in the end, if we do not acknowledge the presence of hope or utilize the presence of hope to actually drive action or shape, right, what a we'll call it a post-Pandora AI world, right, looks like, then yeah, I think all of that is going to happen. So what does all of that mean? It means, for better or for worse, it's really up to individuals in terms of how AI is going to kind of shake out in the future. So in terms of climate, and that's a big discussion. I get pinged on that daily. In fact, like at least 3 or 4 times a day.
I believe it.
Well, I want to use AI, but I feel really bad about using it. And it's usually from women. It's always from
because
women.
we're the ones that have a moral compass, apparently.
We're the ones that have moral compass. We're thinking of the greater good. We're thinking of the community. All right. All good decision making, like practices. And when you choose to abstain, what I tell people is then you also choose to abstain effectively from this whole conversation of where are we going to take AI? Or what does AI look like? Or who gets access to it? Remember earlier I said artificial intelligence is really collective intelligence. And when I say collective intelligence basically means like predominantly a white male historical point of view, right? And data and feedback, right? Consider the source 100%. And it's this, so it's, to me, it just makes sense that, all right, then we have this technology that is based off of this training data, but the training isn't done because it continues to learn from interaction. So if there are more and more interactions from people who have differing points of view or that can course correct, right? Or add in more training data, which is helpful to make this collective intelligence truly collective and not just like historically, quote unquote, right, collective. And from an environmental standpoint, there's no negating the fact that AI is resource intensive. AI is tech, tech is resource intensive. What we should actually be considering in terms of how to answer this question is, how are we getting our energy? Full stop. Right? Because then that, if we had a better understanding and a more sustainable approach to that, any of this stuff downstream would be moot. Right. And so I think it can be both. And now suddenly we have this technology who could answer these big questions like, how do we cure cancer? How do we solve climate change? How do we generate, sustainable energy? It's almost like that trade-off may be worth it, right? If we use it in that way, and if there's pressure to use it in that way, or an understanding to use it in that way. But what I also like to remind people too is that we, just by existing, have a footprint. We know this. We talk about our own carbon footprint. But, in life, we talk about like our financial budgets a lot, right? What goes in, what goes out. We know about calorie deficits, and that kind of budgeting. But we've never talked about, say, like energy budgeting. And this is an interesting exercise that I would encourage folks to do with ChatGPT for the first time, if they want to experiment, is to understand like what exactly is the energy expenditure or the energy budget for an individual to exist where you are for 1 year. And what is the breakdown of what actually, takes up the vast majority of those resources? And what you're going to find is that it's industrial agriculture. It's transportation, especially all of those like, international travels, definitely those private jets, right? And larger commercial infrastructure and fast fashion, right? So, I have a lot of people coming at me, and it's interesting. I had this one exchange with one commenter who was relentless. And I said, hey, I don't disagree with you. Those are evils. But she wanted to make a point. And I finally said, look, I appreciate you being very staunch in your view, and I respect that. But I find it ironic that we are spending energy right now battling over this, and all you're doing is like driving up my engagement rather than actually like not using energy.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is like that TikTok scroll, it comes at a cost. And we haven't had that awareness, but suddenly now we may have a tool like AI where even on an individual level, I was shocked to figure out like, my goodness, like
Yeah.
if I buy something from Zara versus buying something secondhand or just wearing something forever, it contributes greatly, right, to my carbon footprint.
Yeah.
And so does my AI usage. So I have conscientiously, my energy budget is such that, I make decisions around secondhand, clothing styles. I eat primarily like plant-based or local, as much as possible as budgets allow. And, we've been very conscientious about how and when we travel.
Right.
And if all of those things, make an impact and give you some sort of agency, and I just don't want people to abstain out of guilt. I want people to conscientiously engage while being aware of all of these other factors. But especially if you are a woman or if you are part of any historically underrepresented group, your participation in AI is going to be crucial, especially now, right? With the regulation or the lack of regulation. Because if we want AI to be more just and better, we need more people who have those voices, who are going to make it more just and better.
Yes. And I think that along with the AI idea of getting on board and understanding where your carbon footprint lies, one of my favorite books that I've read is by Bill Gates, actually, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And why I like it so much is because he does not beat around the bush of saying, guys, we can't really fly private jets. Meanwhile, he's flying around in a private jet. He opens the book by saying, I know that I have a private jet and I use it, but I offset that by doing this, this, and this. It is all about getting your carbon footprint to be neutral. And what I mean by that is if, for instance, in the realm of AI, if you're going to spend 15 searches on AI, what are you doing to offset that? Are you buying fast fashion? Because that's only going to add to it. Are you buying secondhand? Because then it'll retract from it. Are you cutting beef out of your diet? Because that will retract from it. Are you taking public transportation? That will retract from it. It's all about the balance. And that, what to me was what was so reassuring about that book and that text specifically, because it's like, okay, if I can't do this and everyone else is using this, everyone else is getting ahead, it's what you can realistically do. And Bill Gates was like, I'm not going to stop flying my private jet because it gets me to these conferences. It gets me to X, Y, and Z. And it's become a part of his routine. Is it the best routine ever? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is the awareness of understanding the difference of not allowing yourself to have something out of, like what you said, out of just sheer guilt, versus understanding where your energy is actually being spent. And are you spending it in places that you actually want to and that you find valuable? Or is it just an added consequence to your actions?
It's taking agency and doing that critical thinking, right? Around not just existing, but how you want to make an impact, right, in the world. And it's your choice. It can or cannot be AI. And my plea earlier for women and people of color and historically underrepresented folks, like, that ultimately is your decision. I want you to have agency. We all have agency. But to have that agency holistically around how we exist with this technology and all of the other things that have an impact, we have never really openly talked about that, right, as a culture or as a society. And so I hope that when people go through this sort of like decision-making process about whether or not to participate with AI, that suddenly opens up to them, right? Because it gives them possibility, but it also gives them responsibility around how to show up as a proper citizen, right? Because what we do certainly affects one another.
Right. And as we continue the development of AI, where do you see the future of AI going? Like, is it really coming for everyone's jobs? Is that something that everyone needs to start worrying about as their job security?
Yeah, that is what's on everyone's mind right now. And it's safe to say No one knows. If anyone says that they know, they're lying. Like, no one really knows how it's going to shake out. There's some indicators. But what is clear is that AI is going to transform a lot of things. And transform is scary because it is change.
Right.
So when we talk about jobs, a lot of the jobs that we know about came about because of the industries and the type of economies that we have. In a post-AI world, a lot of those jobs may not exist, but there are so many jobs that we may not even know about, right? That are a result of this. One conversation that you've probably heard about is that like it's going to completely eliminate like entry-level jobs, right? For white collar or like knowledge workers. And people are like, oh my gosh, then how am I going to get like experience if there's no entry-level job? Think of it this way, like this is our frame of how we see jobs and economies and like, let's say corporate life, right? As an example, the framework is here and entry level is here. What if by everyone having access to AI and being trained to work and think with AI, suddenly that frame shifts over here and you enter that frame up here, which means then what do we do prior to entering the workforce where we get them to be at that level, right? So it's not simply a workforce question, it's also an education question. And how do we work with that in tandem? We have every right to be worried about it, but the more important question is, what are we going to do about it, right? Again, agency. We are not helpless in this, in that AI is also a technology that people can use to sort of, help with their learning. And again, education. People are like, oh my gosh, like everyone's going to cheat in college. Why should I go to college? Why should I spend money in college? Let's be real, y'all. Like, college is a big, like 3 to 4 year networking party, and it's a branding exercise for individuals, right?
100%.
No one knows what they remember. No one remembers what they studied in undergrad, right?
Nope.
It's more of like, you have this degree, or like, oh, you went to this school, or like, oh, you know this person through alumni. It's a very old institute and tradition that is run like a corporation with profit margins, and also like it is very like branding heavy, right? Which isn't to say it doesn't have value. They all have value, but they are going to be forced, right, to rethink how they exist in the age of AI. So a post-AI world, the only thing that is certain is we have to transform.
Yes.
So that's the only thing we're going to answer is like, will AI transform? No, it's going to transform. It's a question of how are you going to transform? How is this industry, right, going to transform? And even before work, my bet is that the first industry that really needs to be responsive to AI is education.
Yes. And I have seen that in interviews with Ivy League school principals, or not principals, the president of the school. And they're talking about what their students are doing and how their students are using computers. And they had some tech CEOs come in and talk to their students, and their students as sophomores were doing something that tech CEO hadn't done until he had 20 years of experience. And so the amount of knowledge that's able to be gained so rapidly, because you can truly become an expert. I won't say an expert, probably whatever the step before an expert is, in anything that you could possibly want, if you want to dedicate yourself to that, if you want to put your time into figuring out how I am going to prompt this machine to get me on track to become an expert in this. And you can prompt it to do that. Be like, I want you to make me an expert in this. You know the most in the world about this thing. Tell me all about it. And then they'll provide you a structure plan, and then you go through it, and it's kind of the rest is history. But it's such an interesting idea to adopt it into what your education system is instead of forcing it out, because we all know what happens. Like, the lock only keeps the good man out. Like, you're gonna figure out ways to cheat if you're not supposed to use it. Like, that seems obvious.
It does. And I think for a lot of people on the outside who have been through the system, we see like more of those opportunities and that potential. But at the same time, I suspect a lot of what we see in terms of the cheating is a result of how we have constructed and rewarded like educational performance, right? It is about output. It isn't necessarily about insight and synthesis. And to your point, we can have a lot of knowledge and skill. AI can help us with that. But what then leaves to be trained, or it leaves to be like truly cultivated, and what may be the opportunity for like real life human connection and like college and education, is how you translate all of that information, those facts and that knowledge into actual like wisdom, or into like know-how and into true expertise, right? How you take all of that, train all of that, but then like synthesize it.
Yeah.
And that's something that's still that's presently missing from how we go through the education system, I think, right now, and also like how we're expected to perform at work, right?
Yeah.
And show up. And I think I'm a tech nerd. I'm a non-tech nerd. We can call it that.
I love that.
And I'll also be the first to tell people STEM education, science, tech, environmental studies, that should not necessarily lead, right, in this like post AI era either. Because in this AI era, or even like the tech industry now, we really incentivize people to kind of think and function like machines. Are you analytical? Like, are you good with numbers? Can you do this? Can you understand formula? And they all serve a purpose and a place, and like they will continue to have value. However, in an age of AI where, we have been valued to kind of think and act like machines, now the machines are kind of outperforming us thinking and acting like machines. What's kind of left over is what's this undefined territory around what it means to be a human, right, in the age of AI, and generate that value and that worth, not just like as a productive worker, but like as a human being, like wanting like meaning and purpose, right, and impact. And those are questions that will have to be answered really rapidly. And again, the more people who are thoughtful and considerate and community-minded who are part of that education, the better I think the outcome will be.
Oh, 100%. And you hit the nail on the head right there of saying that people are afraid of making themselves almost obsolete. Right. I was an engineer, or I am an engineer, I should say, and I went to school for mechanical engineering. And one of the first things in one of my first classes was, your job is to engineer yourself out of a job. And that has always been my mindset of, there is going to be something that is going to replace you. Something that's going to be innovated that is going to replace you, whether it's a CAD system, whether it's an AI model, like whatever it is, there is going to be something that replaces you. So what you need to do is not consider yourself an engineer, consider yourself a problem solver, and how are you going to solve this problem? And I think that what you said comes at twofold, and what I'm about to say is that first, the people that are scared of losing their jobs to AI are people that deeply identify themselves in their career. And I feel like there needs to be a separation between human and career, because at a moment's notice, you can switch career. You might find your career obsoleted. And what value are you going to hold within yourself if that does happen? The other part that I think is so important is the value of human. And I worked at a startup in tech for a little while, and one of the most valuable things that our customers would talk to us about is, we love talking to your team. We love being able to get on the phone with your team and work through a problem. And that is huge. And I think that that's what's so important, is humans aren't going anywhere. We need to find what makes us valuable.
Preach. That makes my heart sing. It's going to require us to shift in a way. And you are so right in that a lot of that fear is, yes, like, earning a living and making a living, but, we worry about that a lot because things cost so much now, right? Or things like require costs, right? And so it isn't necessarily like, how do I keep my job? But like, then how do we make life more affordable, right? For people in that regard. But then also like, there's that fear of like, my whole identity is my work. My worth is like baked into like what I do. So if AI does it, then what does that prove as my worth as a human being? And that right there, no wonder people are so fearful, right, about AI. And again, that's a construct of like our current times where we are, told that that's kind of how we live, right? We work a 9 to 5, like, and then we retire at 65, and your worth as like a productive human being and like supporting a household. None of that is bad, but it also doesn't need to be like the continued truth, right? Or the continued like lived experience. And what I think inventions and transformations like AI present to us collectively is an opportunity to think, all right, then why are we here?
Right.
Right. What is it that we can do with our time? Like, does it give me a capacity to take on a platform and to, share my expertise and, have interesting conversations and empower other people like you are doing, right? Also, as someone with a Mech-E background, right?
Yeah.
But then also, what does this mean in terms of what exactly does work need to be? Right now, what we hear is companies are going to use AI and then lay off a bunch of people. But like what we're also seeing is that, like, to your point, people like talking to people. And AI, as powerful as it is, cannot handle how squishy and uncertain people are, right? Whether it's in like a commercial transaction or working together, right, in an organization, there are not enough SOPs within a company to account for every possible deviation, personality type, situation, right, that might come up that requires a human being that can handle all this ambiguity. And that's the key word here is that, yeah, it's trained on collective intelligence. It has like historical data points and it can infer, right, and surface patterns. But it can't handle ambiguity.
Right.
The less context, the more ambiguity you give an AI, the less quality output, right, that you get. But we as human beings are kind of engineered for ambiguity. That's what our brains are for, right? What is this scenario? How would I respond to this? What about these like interpersonal dynamics? Like, what's this sort of like collective knowledge, community knowledge that I have? And what I hope it does, and I haven't really talked about on my channels, but something that I want to start introducing to people to kind of claim as their own, are other types of intelligence. Because what we're talking about is that cognitive intelligence, right? The tasks, the execution, even some of the critical thinking. But there are other types of intelligence academically and scientifically out there, like emotional intelligence and relational intelligence and that collective like community intelligence that the AI has yet to encroach upon. And a lot of scientists and researchers wonder like if it ever could, right? So what if that is the human realm? Because let's be honest, we are not a soft skill oriented economy or culture, right?
Nope.
It's no, hard stop, we are not. And so what if then that is the opportunity where suddenly all of us who like are like, oh, I'm the vibes or I'm the personality higher or like, but they're really soft skills that are so important in being the connective tissue for a community, for a company, for an organization, and also for like how we process and how we think. So a lot of times these people with soft skills think like, oh, I'm not an SOPs process person. I'm like, actually you are.
Yep.
Because you are thinking of the 20 different variables that no one else is thinking about that need to be brought in, right, to this process or how you build out a workflow or an automation.
Yeah. And speaking as a personality hire myself, you can tell, like, when you walk into a room, especially being me, walking into a room of engineers, and they're like, oh, thank God. Like, you can see the tension relieve in these people because they know that I'm going to facilitate the conversation. They know that they just have to answer what I ask and that I'll go and be charismatic and they don't have to worry about that. I can visibly see that. The tension relieve from their shoulders when I walk into the room and I start talking. I see it. And there's just no way. I've never felt that way with AI. There's no way. I'll pull it up in a tab and I'm never like, thank God AI is here. I'm so grateful. Woo! Like, yeah.
I know, tell that to anyone who's got to go through like an AI HR like interview, right? Like it's the worst.
It's horrible. And I recently was scrolling on LinkedIn today and saw like insert like soft but like firm rejection letter, and it was just like the input for what the AI function was, and it got sent.
So embarrassing.
So embarrassing. You cannot replace people in that regard. And although human error exists, yes, 100%, so does machine operating error. Like, it is not 100% of the time. It is not. And no matter what anyone tells you, it is not.
No, it's not. I completely agree. And I say this as someone, so like, we talk about a lot of the bigger picture philosophical stuff around AI, which is very important. And a lot of that drives like the product side of AI, which is like what tools are available, what's in my tech stack, what should I use? And let me tell you, as someone who builds, so, we talk about workflows. Workflows don't have to include automations, right? But anyone who builds like workflow automations, it's not a one and done.
And
Like
you're talking workflows just in terms of defining what that is of here's a list of steps, here's what you need to follow. It's almost like a recipe
Yes.
of what to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there are plenty of ways for us to use workflows as recipes without any automations. But right now, the big hype is around agentic workflows, right? Which is where a lot of the stuff is automated, delegated to AIs or kind of more like hardcore tech. And that's fine. But it is not a set it and forget it deal. Like
Right.
anyone who's built these agentic workflows, as I am doing, will tell you it requires a lot of setup, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of something called a human in the loop because it can go off the rails. So there's an AI called Claude. It's like a competitor of ChatGPT. I use both. I love Claude. And it's from a company called Anthropic. And Anthropic ran an experiment that made the news last month. I don't know if you've heard of it, where they gave Claude, they named him Claudius, with the objective of here's $1,000 in capital, here's a team of humans. We want you to run a vending machine business in our office building, right? The objective is make it profitable and like sell stuff. And so it does it. And at first it seems great. It sets an inventory, it sets pricing, it tasks the humans, it has emails and conversations with buyers. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, like it is doing everything. And then suddenly it start making up employees. And like people on the team are like, I don't know who this person is. Like, who do they email? And one of the customers said, like, I want you to get some tungsten cubes. Why would you need a tungsten cube in a vending machine, right? And it orders tungsten cubes, right? And sells them at a loss. And, it starts like giving away, or it came up with a sales strategy that made no sense. Like it said, everyone gets a 40% employee discount. Ding dong, you are a vending machine in an HQ. Everyone's an employee. You just completely killed your profit margins, right? Yeah. Where it's like, if it goes unchecked, it just kind of went off the rails. And, suffice it to say, we're not going to be hiring Claudius, right, as a business manager. But it was great at like getting a lot of stuff done. But ultimately, as like an autonomous, say like even retailer, vending machine, very straightforward like business process,
Right.
it didn't do so well, right? So it's humans have to be involved. Ethan Mosaek, who is a scholar, has an incredible term that I use daily called co-intelligence. And so if we want to know what a post-AI world looks like, it's where we define a type of co-intelligence.
Yeah. And I feel like that is really important to note is putting another human in instead of another AI model to monitor it. Because that I have heard, there was probably an experiment maybe 10 years ago with Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know if you ever heard of it. And he had two AI models talking to each other. And they just started making up their own language. And no one could decode what they were saying. They were like, what is going on? How is this possible? And they would take learned words that they knew and they would repeat it. And so the phrase that they would repeat was like, it's a ball, it's a ball, it's a ball, it's a ball, it's a ball. And they're like, what are you talking about? But that was like Morse code or something to the other AI module. And that to me, I feel like is what everyone who has a negative connotation of AI thinks that AI is doing, is that they are harvesting information and that they are talking internally amongst their servers, which what do you say to that? Because that to me like sounds like something out of a futuristic novel, but how far from the truth is that?
I'm always going to say we don't know, right?
Right.
But it is, you're right. It is something out of sci-fi. As Isaac Asimov, classic science fiction writer, has several short stories, right, and entire books around this idea of like artificial intelligence. But in terms of it being subversive and like getting to a point where it can deceive, they're already doing, I think, experiments where I think one group actually played diplomacy with different AIs, assuming the roles of the different countries, right, during like, some historical period in Europe. So I think Claude was like Germany and like Gemini was Italy. And they went back and forth and they found that Claude was the least deceptive. Claude was like the most like community minded. Grok, of course, was like completely off the rails. But like that ChatGPT 03 was actually like kind of like a player. Like it was like a team player, but then it kind of backstabbed Claude, and it was just very like diplomacy. And we could call it as like, oh my gosh, like they're thinking for themselves, or two, they're following their instructions very, very well.
Yeah.
Right. According to their system instructions. And it makes sense Claude showed up that way because Anthropic has made it a big deal to say that it is kind of the most neutral, the most egalitarian, kind of out there, versus ChatGPT, where it's designed to be helpful, right? Or designed to be responsive.
Right.
And so we don't really know, because it's true, it is kind of a black box. I don't think most engineers really would understand, let alone average people like us, like what really is going behind. But fundamentally, if we look at the architecture of artificial intelligence, so they actually did a visualization of all like the neural networks, right, of these AIs. And they're impressive. They look very, very robust. Like anyone who's a nerdy note taker knows about Obsidian. And one of the best views of Obsidian is having the graph view, right, of your knowledge. And you're like, wow, that's an example of kind of like what a neural network visualization is. And so you see Mistral, you see Claude, you see ChatGPT o3, you see ChatGPT o3 Pro, and it's like, oh, this is amazing. And then it scans over to like a human brain's neural network, and it is massive. It is like, if these are tiny galaxies, right? The human brain is like an entire quadrant of the universe.
Right.
And so it has a long way to go. I won't say it won't ever get there, but like right now, what we are seeing, I'm inclined to say no, that it's simply following instructions. And when you look at, sort of like the entire human brain as sort of the benchmark, it's going to have a hard time coming up to that point, because the human brain can handle so much ambiguity and complexity that computers can't.
Right. Yeah. And my other question to you about something that I feel like I have received a lot of telling people that I use AI on a regular cadence is, aren't you afraid that you're just teaching AI your voice and how humans think? Have you ever heard that argument?
Yeah. So how afraid am I? So this is an interesting thing. And it's more of instead of like a moral conundrum, it's more of like a psychological play, because it's the same type of argument that we have right now with like social media and apps and software around like, how much of like my own information and data do I want to share with social media companies in exchange for the algorithm, or exchange for better search results, or convenience, or ease, right? I am a huge fan of ChatGPT's context memory, which means that it's kind of global. So if I have a conversation in one thread, I can recall it in, another thread conversation, and it makes it very smooth and seamless to connect kind of some lateral ideas. And that's what I like. Does it mean that then I am training it on my voice to be me, right? And to think like me? I would say that I would then call back this concept of co-intelligence, right? Where I use this type of intelligence as like, it's like kind of, if you ever backpacked for like several days, it's kind of nice to have like, you go down to Grand Canyon, they have pack mules, right? That can kind of help you like take your stuff, so you can kind of, have the adventure, where it's almost like they're taking on some of the load, right? To help me do some of these things. But if I am not that decision maker for like the big decisions, I don't care if they make a decision to be like, I'm going to draft this email this way and I may send it, right? Because it's like a telemarketer or whatever. I have less of a problem with that versus it running everything for me, right?
Yeah.
Kind of delegating everything. And so for me, the trade-off is safe, or that's something that I am comfortable with, because it gives me what I need without me feeling like I've lost any of my agency.
Yeah.
And if anyone says that to you, but like, they're location sharing everything, through Alexa, Apple, Siri, and Meta, I think people need to expand, right, than what, that argument as to like why they won't use AI.
Oh yeah. My brother's had an Apple Watch since the day that Apple Watches were sold, and he's like, they have been tracking where I've been going, how often I walk, how often I move, my heart rate. They know everything. Like all of that data is somewhere.
It is. There's so much data out on you. And like, if you have an Alexa, you know there's more information out on you. Like, it's not a coincidence when like products, right, show up on your algorithm where it is, that. And I think therefore some people have comfort with it, but it is more of, someone's trained on my voice. Someone's trained on my voice to do kind of like menial things, but like to truly show up as me with my quirks, like in an authentic way. I think then we're going to have to, it's this idea of like, what is a simulation and what is real? And I think the concept of like velvet reality. We'll eventually get there, but are we there now? Because like I trained a custom GPT to like kind of sound like me. No, I have no worries.
Yeah, that's kind of what my sentiment is as well. I'm like, yeah, I really have a hard time because especially because I formulate most of my prompts to ChatGPT in a very, I want to say diplomatic, but also professional manner. Like, hey, can you please do that? And it's not how I talk. It's not how I present myself. It is far from. It's basically the same way that I talk to Google, and I'm not worried about Google, like Google search engine coming back and being like, I'm the new Sarah. I'm not, yeah.
No, and it could never like truly be me because even then, so I customize my chat GPT and I have a bunch of assistants and agents that have different personalities because I work with them so much that I can't do like corporate mode all the time, right? Like I just want to rip my face off. Like I need some personality, I need some variety. And they've been fun in that way, but they only have so many shades of like how they can show up versus like if they were a human being, right? And they had like a whole range of personality. And so in constructing them, I see kind of how great they are, but also what their limitations are.
Right. Yeah. So last question, what has been your biggest obstacle to overcome with
Distraction, shiny object syndrome.
Yep.
Yeah, it literally, there's so much change and so much update happening. It's really hard to feel like you're not behind or you're not keeping up. And I work with it daily and I have to remind myself to stay focused. That's the biggest challenge. And what I come back to is what serves me? Why am I into AI? What purpose does it serve? What problems, right, am I solving for myself, for people at work, for people like I'm doing projects with? And so it's a constant reminder. It's something that I have to like level set daily, especially with me because like I'm like, oh, squirrel. Like I literally can be easily distracted. And it's like last week I was talking with a colleague about how, we're building out these agents and assistants. And then at the same time, it's like, oh, but did you see this new platform? Like it could be easier than like this platform called N8N. I'm like, oh, maybe we should start training everybody on that. And it's like, stop. Like we don't need to go there. Like we have enough already, and it solves the problem, right? That would be my biggest challenge, and I think everyone's differs. But I'm curious, like, what's your biggest challenge with AI that you find so far?
I think for me, it's just feeling like I don't know the best way of prompting it to give me an answer on something. And so I feel like I constantly am trying to watch videos or look up Reddit threads on what is the best way to interact with ChatGPT to get the result or the response that you're looking for. And I think that also is coupled with my lack of wanting to type information in, of being like, I don't want to type in, like, if I'm making a grocery list, I don't want to type in all of the food that I have in my fridge. Or like from my previous time of going into ChatGPT and going through that list of updating, okay, well, we ate 50% of the apples and we ate blah, blah, blah. It's just like that. It's just sheer laziness on my accord. Ultimately is what it is.
I'll offer a reframe. I don't think it's laziness. I think it's a data point. It's friction, right?
Yes.
It's a friction that prevents us. And that typing thing, so true. It's so true, especially for me. I think and speak faster than I type. And I still write longhand because I find that is good for my brain, right? That's a good type of friction. But typing, especially if I've been typing all day and I have to type for something else and I have to, it's hard. That I have really appreciated when AI is multimodal, which means that I can interact with it beyond like a typing chat.
Yeah.
And using the voice feature is amazing in something like ChatGPT to kind of like talk it through. And the image recognition, right, is amazing in ChatGPT to kind of help figure out, okay, what's in my fridge and like what could I make? But I feel you on like that learning rabbit hole. And Sarah, you could talk to anybody on there. You could talk to like an ML engineer, or you could talk to whoever, and they're like, there's so much right out there in terms of what's happening, what's going to be the next big thing, like how do I get better at this thing, did you see this, that. It's there's so much. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
100% of the time. And it's like they update it every single day. And I'm like, number one, who's working on this? AI? Because who has the time to just update every day?
Yeah, and it's maddening, but it's every day. We're all level setting, and I know so many other AI practitioners who feel that same sort of like pull, distraction, and also like confusion and urgency of like, how do we continue to approach this?
Where do we go? Where do we look? What do we take into consideration? What's true? What's false? Yeah, it's a lot. It's very overwhelming.
It is a lot. And I will say for your, example of knowing what kind of prompts, right, to use and which would be the best prompts, I'll have a challenge for you, which is for you to actually create a custom GPT or an assistant, whatever we want to call it, to actually help you create amazing prompts. So essentially creating a prompt engineering assistant where you can just word vomit in what it is that you want to do and like what type of model, right, you might be working with. And it gives you a well-structured prompt that you can start off with and that then you can customize.
See, and that is the genius of talking to people, because I would have never thought of that. It's like, okay, you can automate, and then you feel so pigeonholed into one thing, you'd never go back out to see the bird's eye view again. And so you're just stuck and you're like, well, this is my problem. This is what I have to live with. And it's like, okay, actually, hey, no, that's not true.
No, and it seems so meta to like use AI to help you prompt AI, but like if you're talking to an AI, what better resource and tool than to confer with? Than something that knows how like it likes to get information, right?
Oh yeah. Well, that's the same point here of like talk to another human to figure out how a human uses AI. And it's the same. When you think about it, it is so obvious, but my brain is like, not registering. Nope.
Well, it's so easy to like go down the YouTube rabbit hole. I mean, I do it all the time, or just like, try to find it. But it's then like, how does it then translate into like something actionable, right? I have a Google Chrome tab and like, note graveyard, right, of things that it's just like, oh, those are all great ideas. And they just sort of sit there.
Yep. Right? That's my yellow notepad on my desk. I'm like, okay, this makes sense right now. And who knows if I look at it in 2 days, if it'll make sense then as well. That is the question.
Exactly. If it's lost of the moment, then it may never resurface again.
Exactly. Well, Vanessa, it was so great having you on. I truly could probably talk to you about AI for hours, which is not a topic that I thought that I could ever talk about for hours because I felt like I knew nothing about it, but turns out I have a lot of questions about it.
And actually, you know quite a bit and you use it a lot. And I want, anyone who's watching or listening to understand, like, if you are in it and you are participating with it, it won't take a lot for you to become fluent with it. Because it's so new. And yes, it's rapidly changing, but like you can get to a point, to a baseline where like it totally serves you and it works for you. And then you can kind of keep up your own pace.
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm hoping to get to. I'm aspiring to be at that level.
I think you're already there. If not, you'll get there very quickly.
Yeah, I probably am downplaying how proficient I actually am with it, but alas, I like to not self-sabotage, but definitely condescendingly talk about my skill set.
The self-deprecation is so real, but I'm going to encourage you to own it. The fact that you're even like using it already in like your daily workflows and like how you work and how, you're using it to amplify yourself. You're well within like super user territory.
Look at me.
It's true. I don't think people need to like, build these crazy like automations necessarily to be like, oh, I'm an AI expert or like know all the theory. I think if you make AI work for you, you're a practitioner.
Yeah. And that's emphasis on make it work for you instead of making it work for everybody else and trying to solve the world's problems, which is always what my mind goes to of, well, if you're only solving your problems, that's just the beginning of it. Like, oh, okay, great. I guess I don't know.
But your problems are just as important, right? Like if you give yourself more capacity, there's more of you to be present, right, in the world.
100%. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on. Truly thankful to get your expertise about AI and hear all of your insights about both the philosophical side, but also more of the technical side and everything in between, pretty much. And yeah, let everybody know where they can find you on TikTok or social media.
Yeah, the same handle across everything at Think with V, just the letter V. My friends call me V, give me a shout, say hi. And also vanessachang.com is where you can find all the stuff that I'm up to, and including a link to my newsletter. It's called Regarding Human, where I talk about all of these topics and also give you some practical kind of guidelines, tutorials, and frameworks to kind of make AI work for you.
Ooh, I'll have to sign up. I need to do that. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Consider the Source podcast. If you love this episode, please make sure to follow and subscribe. And if you feel so inclined, please give us a positive review as well as a 5-star review wherever you typically listen to podcasts. It would mean so much to me and so much to the guests that I have on the podcast if you are able to contribute and give me some feedback of how to make it a little bit better. If you want to also give me recommendations as to who you'd like to see on the show, please make sure to leave that in the comments as well, or you can send me an email. You can find my email in the text at the bottom of the show notes. And thanks again for watching this week's episode of the Consider the Source podcast, and I will see you next week. Bye.